Hello, everyone. Welcome to this follow up presentation on power. So far in the Blackboard classroom, you have had a PowerPoint on power. That's largely built upon the work of Max Weber, power in organizations and how bureaucracies work. Then I've also introduced you to the work of Jeffrey Pfeffer, a Stanford professor, who points out that oftentimes we think of power as a bad thing, but that it's really a good thing. It's the only way you get things done. And so he's kind of Machiavellian with a toolbox of how you can accomplish the things that you want to get done. Of course, the best way is to convince people they actually want it done. And so there's a little bit of manipulation that goes on there with the ability to convince people. Uh, that can be, of goodwill, or it can be a little conniving, or power of reciprocity. We might call that power of the purse. I can give you things. I can scratch your back. You can scratch mine. So he convinces us power is a good thing and we need it in organizations. But in policing, if you've noticed, particularly now in current affairs, we get criticized every day for using power. So what's going on? I'm going to argue in this presentation that what's going on is that we're overusing power, hard power, coercive power, and we're not recharging our batteries. We're not tending the garden, if you will. So I'm basing this, I'm bringing in, as you can tell, I bring in these theories from outside our field, from economics, from political science, because I think they're very apt. So basing this on the work of William Muir. Muir, you have an article coming up in a week or two on Muir's work. And today I'm going to talk about another one of his pieces of work, a book that was published in 2012 called Freedom in America. And in that, what he points out is that in the American system, well, practically any system, if we have property, if we have prestige or face, if we have attachments, then we open ourselves up to being taken hostage. So let's use an example of like a gang infested area. Why do people not paint over graffiti? Well, they don't paint over graffiti and they don't fix the car that got the stereo ripped out of because they make themselves less of a target if they have less that can be taken from them. So I give up hostages in order not to be taken hostage. And we do the same thing in policing, only we're not equipped to give up the hostages. We don't want to give up our hostages. So let me give you some examples of this. What's our primary responsibility? Our primary responsibility is to keep safety and security in the community. And how does a gang or a cartel attack us? Well, they make it evident that it's not safe for security in the community. And this is closely related to the prestige we have saving face in the community. It's very easy to make us lose face. They have most of the power in that regard, the way we currently operate our systems. And that then destroys attachments we have with people in the community, and it also makes us look irrational. Like in Ferguson, where we shoot a young unarmed black man, it makes us look irrational. I'm not saying we are irrational, particularly when someone's trying to hurt us. It may be very rational for us to have SWAT teams, have these military vehicles, but the way we exercise power opens us up to having these little hostages that are created in our community. I would suggest that the reason this happens and why we make ourselves vulnerable is because we overuse hard power. What is hard power? Easily the most discussed hard power is the power of coercion or the power of the sword. But we also abuse this power of the purse, or that I talked about that Pfeffer discusses. That both of these are easily abused, and they're also highly visible, and they're very expensive. I'd suggest that we do have options. Soft power, for instance. I'm not going to go into details on this, but by sharing power through new public administration, where we invite people in and have them help us come up with what is best for their community, has a large amount of potential in policing to help us protect those hostages I talked about in terms of things like safety and security, our prestige, the attachments we have in the community, and whether or not we appear rational. Here's a process approach of how we might start setting agendas, where we would go get input. But in essence, what I'm arguing is that we should never forget that the shareholders, the community holders, actually own these jobs, and that it's a team sport. So we can figure out ways to balance the power. We'll share that power. We'll charge our batteries, and we'll actually have more power. That's the crux and the essence of my argument. So, Muir again, he's got a couple of the article, he's got the book I previously mentioned. He's also got another book called Police Street Corner Politicians. This one is like 1994, I think, is when it was published. Each one of these, he explores this idea of these three kinds of power. And I would make the argument that the power of the word, the soft power, the power of persuasion, is the one that we are not using enough. And the way we use these is we look at these other resources that we have and we try to build them up. It's almost like a Kurt Lewin idea of force field analysis. You have to look at what forces are opposing you and what forces are helping you, and you have to build up the forces that are helping you. We already do a good job of going out and trying to break down the forces that are opposing us by arresting people and putting them in jail, but we don't build up those other forces. And so, we try to use hard power to overcome these issues that perhaps a little bit of soft power would not only do the job but just as well, but the people that we're trying to help would appreciate and would support more. I'm not arguing that there are all problems are solved with soft power. What I'm arguing is that we should be building relationships ahead of time so that when we have to use hard power, people will give us a chance to explain that whole idea of tending the garden or charging the batteries. So here's how we do it. Well, first of all, starting at the top, you have tactical communications, and this is, the daily management of information. This is why we did this. This is the rumor you may have heard. Here's our story. And this is a very distant type of thing. It's happening in real time, but we're miles away from people. Then there are strategic communications that if we're doing the job right, we're out there and we're getting people's input. We're asking them to tell us what kind of police department they want. We invite them to come to our police stations and take police academies. We get out there and we interact with their kids. And again, the distance is closer than miles, but it's in the same room. And then this logistic communication that I called it takes decades to build lasting relationships, and you only do it by breaking bread with people, laughing and crying, going to their weddings, going to their funerals, actually being a part of the community. In other words, we invest heavily in the last 3 feet of distance, the distance between me and you. And I'd like to just leave you with this idea, again from another field. Clausewitz wrote this book on war, published in 1852, where he suggested that amateur soldiers studied strategy and tactics, the handcuffs, the arresting, the SWAT team tactics, kicking doors, community policing strategies, and professionals study logistics, the long term. How do you supply a community? How do you make them better? How do you help them build capacity so they can manage their own community and you, their public servants? And that, I think, is the essence of soft power. We have to be willing to let go of the power, give it to those folks so that they will trust us when we have to use hard power. They will at least take the time to say, I know Rob personally, he's a good chief. I know Rob, he's a good officer, and I want to hear his side of this before I make a decision. And that's the entire learning module that I would like you to get from this. I've included a bunch of other audio and video from the actual theorists that bring this in from other fields, but if you get that, I'll be happy. I think we can build on our generations and future generations to maybe help correct some of these police problems. Thanks for listening. Let me know in the discussion board what your comments are. Thank you.